In a glass office overlooking the lights of Gangnam, a billionaire crime boss sat across from the only woman who had ever made him believe he could be an ordinary man. He did not raise his voice. He did not explain himself. He simply reached into a drawer, placed a folder on the table, and slid it toward her without meeting her eyes. Divorce papers. Maya Brooks stared at the document as if it were written in a language she had never learned, though the words were painfully clear. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen. She looked up one final time, searching his face for even a flicker of hesitation. A crack in the wall he had built around himself in the past few weeks. She found nothing, just cold, distant eyes that used to look at her like she was the only person in the room. She signed. What Jang Hyun-woo did not say, what he could never bring himself to say, was that he was signing away his own heart to keep her alive. And what neither of them knew, not even Maya herself, was that she was already carrying his child. She walked out of that building with her whole world collapsing quietly behind her, refusing to let him see her break. She got into a taxi. She did not look back. She did not notice the black SUV that pulled out of a side street and began to follow her through the rain-soaked streets of Seoul. This is the story of a love strong enough to survive a lie built to protect it. Before we continue, tell me in the comments. If the person you loved suddenly turned cold for no reason, would you fight for answers, or would you walk away? Make sure you're subscribed, because this story is about to break your heart before it puts it back together. Let's begin. 2 years before the divorce papers were ever signed, Maya Brooks was just a 26-year-old teacher from the south side of Chicago, boarding a plane with 2 suitcases and a heart full of nerves. She had taken a 1-year contract to teach English in Seoul, a decision that shocked her mother, worried her best friend Tasha Williams, and thrilled absolutely no one but herself. Maya had always been the kind of woman who ran toward uncertainty instead of away from it. She told herself this was simply an adventure, a way to see the world before she settled into the predictable life everyone expected of her. She had no idea she was walking straight into the middle of a war between 2 of Korea's most powerful crime syndicates. Seoul did not welcome her gently. The language barrier left her exhausted by simple errands. Grocery shopping became a puzzle. Reading a bus schedule felt like decoding a secret language. She missed the sound of her mother's laughter, the smell of her grandmother's kitchen, the easy comfort of being understood without translation. There were nights she sat alone in her small apartment in Itaewon and questioned every decision that had brought her there. Then came the evening that changed everything. Maya had been invited to a hotel reception for foreign teachers, a stiff, awkward affair with too much small talk and not enough real conversation. She slipped away early, weaving through the marble lobby of one of Seoul's most prestigious hotels, when her heel caught the edge of a rug and her bag went flying across the polished floor. A man in a tailored black suit caught it before it hit the ground. He didn't smile the way most men did when trying to impress a stranger. He simply studied her for a moment, as though trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't expected to find that night, and handed the bag back to her with quiet politeness. "You should be more careful," he said in accented but confident English. "Not everyone in this city will catch what you drop." That man was Jang Hyun-woo. Maya had no way of knowing that the calm, composed stranger in front of her controlled one of the most feared organizations in the country. To her, he was simply intriguing, reserved where other men were loud, thoughtful where other men were careless. They talked for nearly an hour that night, about nothing important and everything that mattered. He asked about Chicago. She asked about Seoul. Neither of them wanted the conversation to end. Over the following months, what began as coincidence became habit, and habit slowly became devotion. He would appear at the small cafe near her school on his way to meetings he never explained. She would text him photos of her disastrous attempts at Korean cooking, and he would respond with a level of amusement he rarely showed anyone else. Daniel Kim, his closest friend and right hand, noticed the change in him before Hyun-woo ever admitted it to himself. His boss had always been a man who trusted no one completely. Now he was rearranging his schedule around a schoolteacher from Chicago. 8 months into their quiet romance, Hyun-woo finally told her the truth. He explained it plainly, without excuses, watching her face for the reaction he had already braced himself for. The fear, the disgust, the inevitable retreat. He told her about the syndicate his family had built over 3 generations. He told her about the enemies that came with his name, about the danger that followed him like a shadow he could never outrun. He told her she deserved to walk away and that he would not blame her if she did. Maya sat in silence for a long moment. Then she asked him only one question. Do you love me the way you say you do? Or is that a lie too? He looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, his composure nearly broke. It's the only truth I have left. She reached across the table and took his hand. She chose him. If you were in Maya's position, falling for someone who just revealed a dangerous secret, would you have stayed, or would you have run? Let me know in the comments, because Maya's decision was about to test her in ways she never imagined. Keep watching. Choosing Hyunwoo meant choosing the family that came with him, and no member of that family was harder to win over than his mother. Madame Jang Soo-yeon was a woman shaped by decades of survival in a world that showed no mercy to weakness. She had buried a husband taken by rival violence, raised a son to inherit an empire she never wanted for him, and learned to trust almost no one outside her own blood. When Hyunwoo brought Maya home for the first time, introducing her as the woman he intended to marry, Madame Soo-yeon did not raise her voice or cause a scene. She simply looked at Maya the way one looks at an unfamiliar variable in a dangerous equation. A foreigner, she said quietly, in Korean, assuming Maya wouldn't understand. He wants to build a future on a foundation with no roots here. Maya, who had spent months secretly studying Korean in preparation for exactly this moment, met her eyes and responded in careful, imperfect Korean. Then let me grow roots, Amma. The room went silent. Madame Soo-yeon said nothing more that night, but something in her expression shifted. Not acceptance, not yet, but the faintest flicker of respect for a woman bold enough to try. Maya did not try to force her way into the family. She earned her place one quiet act at a time. She learned to prepare traditional dishes, burning more attempts than she would ever admit. She studied the customs Hyunwoo's family valued. The proper way to bow, the significance of holidays, the unspoken rules of respect that governed every interaction. She never complained when Madame Soo-yeon tested her patience, and she never abandoned her own identity to please anyone. She remained unmistakably herself, a proud black woman from Chicago, navigating a new world with grace instead of surrender. The turning point came during a bitter winter when Madame Soo-yeon fell seriously ill with pneumonia. The family's household staff cared for her out of duty. Maya cared for her out of something deeper. She sat by her bedside night after night, cooling her fever with wet cloths, reading to her in halting Korean, refusing to leave even when exhaustion pulled at her own body. When Madame Soo-yeon finally recovered, she took Maya's hand in hers, the first gesture of true affection she had ever offered her. You did not have to stay, she said softly. Family stays, Maya answered. From that day forward, Madame Soo-yeon called her daughter, not daughter-in-law. Their wedding was breathtaking. A fusion of two worlds neither of them had ever expected to merge. Traditional Korean ceremony in the morning, a joyful celebration of American gospel music and Chicago soul food in the evening. Tasha flew in and cried through the entire ceremony. Daniel gave a toast that made even the stoic Hyunwoo laugh out loud. For one perfect day, the danger that shadowed their world felt impossibly far away. Married life brought Maya a new kind of purpose. She built an international consulting firm from nothing, bridging Korean businesses with Western partners, earning a reputation as sharp and relentless in boardrooms as her husband was rumored to be in the world he never brought home. And he kept his promise. Crime never crossed their threshold. Their home was the one place in Seoul where Maya never had to think about the empire her husband ruled. For nearly 2 years, life was close to perfect. Until the night Daniel walked into Hyunwoo's office with a look Hyunwoo hadn't seen on his friend's face in years. They're watching her, Daniel said. Chairman Kwan's people. They've been watching Maya for weeks. The peace they had built was already cracking, and neither of them knew it yet. This is the part where everything Maya and Hyunwoo built starts to unravel. If you believe love can survive even the darkest secrets, drop a comment below and let's see how many of us believe in second chances. The photograph arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped beneath the door of Hyunwoo's private office with no note, no name, no explanation needed. It was Maya, leaving her office building, getting into her car, laughing with a colleague outside a restaurant. Ordinary moments of an ordinary Tuesday, captured by someone who wanted Hyunwoo to know exactly how easily his wife could be reached. Chairman Kwon Sung-ho had been circling Hyunwoo's organization for over a year, probing for weakness, waiting for the one vulnerability that could finally topple him. He had found it, not in Hyunwoo's business empire, not in his loyal soldiers, not in any weapon or threat of violence, but in the one person Hyunwoo loved more than his own life. Daniel wanted to increase security immediately, to surround Maya with protection she would surely notice and question. Hyunwoo refused. He knew Kwon's methods too well. A wall of bodyguards wouldn't protect Maya. It would only confirm to Kwon exactly how valuable a target she had become, inviting an attack rather than preventing one. Hyunwoo sat alone that night, turning the photograph over in his hands until the edges softened from the oil of his fingers, and arrived at a decision that would nearly destroy him. If Maya was no longer his wife, if the entire underworld believed their marriage had failed, that Jang Hyunwoo no longer cared for the American woman he'd married, then she would no longer be a target. She would simply be an ordinary woman again, invisible to men who only understood power and possession. He decided to make the world believe he had stopped loving her. It began in small, almost invisible ways. He came home later than usual, offering no explanation. He stopped reaching for her hand during their evening walks. When she spoke to him about her day, his responses grew shorter, more distant, until conversation between them became a formality rather than a comfort. Maya noticed immediately. Of course she noticed. She had spent 2 years learning every version of this man, and this cold, distant version felt like a stranger wearing her husband's face. "Talk to me," she pleaded one night, standing in the doorway of his office as he refused to look up from papers he wasn't actually reading. "Whatever this is, we can face it together. You promised me we'd always face things together. Some things," he said quietly, still not meeting her eyes, "aren't meant to be faced. They're meant to be endured alone." He began sleeping in the guest room, claiming late-night work that never existed. He stopped answering her calls during the day, letting them ring out while he stared at her name on the screen, hating himself with every unanswered ring. When their second anniversary arrived, he said nothing, did nothing, let the day pass like any other, while Maya sat alone at the restaurant table she had reserved for them, waiting for a man who never came. She began to unravel. The confident, grounded woman who had built an empire of her own in a foreign country began to question everything. Her worth, her place in his life, whether the love she had believed in had ever been entirely real. She lost weight. She stopped sleeping. Tasha called every day from Chicago, listening to her best friend's voice grow smaller and smaller. Finally, on a gray afternoon in his glass office overlooking the city they had built their life in, Hyunwoo asked for a divorce. He told himself it was mercy. He told himself it was protection. He told himself that a broken heart was a small price to pay for keeping her alive. Maya signed the papers without another word, because there was nothing left to say to a man who had already left her, long before the ink ever touched the page. She walked out into the sole evening, carrying a secret even she didn't know yet. A small, growing life that connected her to Hyunwoo in a way no divorce could undo. And somewhere behind her, in the gathering dusk, a black SUV pulled quietly into the street, keeping its distance, watching her every move. If you saw what Hyunwoo was truly sacrificing to protect the woman he loved, type, "I understand him" in the comments. And if you think Maya deserved the truth no matter the danger, type, "She deserved better." Let's see which side wins. This story is far from over. 3 weeks after signing the divorce papers, Maya sat alone in her new apartment holding a small plastic test with 2 pink lines that changed everything. She was pregnant. She should have felt joy. Instead, she felt a grief so heavy it nearly buckled her knees. She was carrying the child of a man who no longer wanted her, building a family with someone who had already walked away. She told no one but Tasha, who flew from Chicago the moment she heard Maya's voice crack over the phone. "You have to tell him," Tasha insisted, holding her best friend as she cried in a way she hadn't allowed herself to since the divorce. "Tell him what?" Maya whispered. "That I'm carrying the baby of a man who stopped loving me? He made his choice, Tasha. I won't force him into a life he doesn't want." But some truths refused to stay buried, and Madame Soo-yeon had spent too many years reading people to miss the signs that something was terribly wrong with her son. Hyunwoo had grown gaunt, hollow-eyed, a man visibly wasting away despite his best efforts to hide it. He avoided his mother's calls the same way he'd once avoided Maya's. When Madame Suyun finally arrived unannounced at his office and demanded answers, he broke down enough to admit the divorce, though he refused, even then, to explain the true reason behind it. Madame Suyun was no fool. She had not survived decades in this world by accepting convenient lies. She began asking her own questions, using contacts her son didn't know she still maintained, until the truth of Kwan's surveillance and Hyunwoo's desperate sacrifice came fully into focus. Then she went to find Maya. She arrived at Maya's apartment dressed simply, without the guards or formality that usually surrounded her. And the moment Maya opened the door, both women understood there was no more hiding left to do. Madame Suyun's eyes moved to the subtle changes in Maya's body, the protective way her hand rested against her stomach, and understanding crashed over her like a wave. "You're pregnant," she said softly. Maya's composure finally shattered completely. Madame Suyun did not offer empty comfort. She did something far more powerful. She took action. Within the hour, she was standing in her son's office, slamming a folder of pregnancy confirmation papers onto his desk with enough force to rattle the glass. "You coward," she said, her voice shaking with a fury Hyunwoo had rarely witnessed in his composed mother. "You didn't just divorce your wife. You divorced your unborn child too. All to protect a woman who is about to raise your baby completely alone, believing you never loved her at all." Hyunwoo stared at the papers, and the wall he had spent weeks constructing around his heart collapsed instantly and completely. "We're having a baby? You were so busy trying to save her life," Madame Suyun said, her anger softening into something closer to heartbreak, "that you nearly destroyed everything worth living for. Love isn't protection through distance, my son. It never was. It's standing beside someone even when it's dangerous to do so." Hyunwoo sank into his chair, the full weight of what he had done, and what he had nearly lost forever, crashing over him at once. He had spent weeks convincing the world he no longer loved Maya Brooks. He had never once stopped. Hyunwoo just discovered he's about to lose his wife and his unborn child because of a sacrifice she never even knew he made. Comment below. Should Maya forgive him, or has he already broken something that can't be repaired? Hyunwoo did not call ahead. He did not send a message warning Maya he was coming. He simply drove through the streets of Seoul faster than he had in years, arriving at her apartment with nothing rehearsed and nothing hidden anymore. When Maya opened the door and saw him standing there, raw and unguarded in a way she hadn't witnessed since the day he first confessed the truth about his family, she almost closed the door in his face. "Almost. I have no right to ask you to listen to me," he said before she could speak. "But please, give me 5 minutes to tell you the truth I should have trusted you with from the beginning." She let him in. He told her everything. The photograph, Kwan's surveillance, the terrifying calculation that had led him to believe pushing her away was the only way to keep her alive. He told her about the sleepless nights spent hating the coldness he forced himself to show her, about the anniversary he'd spent staring at his phone instead of celebrating with her, aching with every second of distance he'd created between them. "I thought I was protecting you," he said, his voice breaking in a way Maya had never heard before. "I nearly lost you trying to save you. I am so sorry." Maya listened in silence, feeling the anger and the heartbreak of the past month collide with the relief of finally understanding the truth. When he finished, she didn't immediately forgive him. She made him understand, in clear and unwavering terms, exactly what his silence had cost her. "You don't get to decide alone what pain I can handle," she said. "Never again. If we face danger, we face it as partners, not as a man protecting a woman who has already proven she can stand beside him through anything." "Never again," he promised. "I swear it." She forgave him, not because the pain disappeared, but because she believed the promise behind his words, and because the child growing inside her deserved parents brave enough to face the world honestly, together. What followed was not a quiet reconciliation but a deliberate, united stand against the threat that had started it all. With Daniel's strategic mind, Madame Suyun's decades of hard-earned wisdom, and Maya's own sharp instincts from years of high-stakes negotiation, the three of them built a plan that didn't rely on violence to end the conflict with Chairman Kwan. Maya, using her business connections and her understanding of leverage, helped uncover financial vulnerabilities in Kwan's operation that Hyunwoo's organization had never thought to examine. Combined with Daniel's careful positioning and Madame Su-yun's long-standing alliances, they cornered Quan into a negotiated retreat, neutralizing the threat without a single shot fired. Months later, in a private hospital suite filled with soft morning light, Maya gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Hyun-woo held his daughter for the first time with hands that had once signed away his marriage to protect the very family he now cradled, tears falling freely down a face the world believed incapable of such tenderness. Madame Su-yun became the most devoted grandmother in Seoul, spoiling her granddaughter with a warmth she had once reserved only for memory. And Hyun-woo finally understood the lesson his own foolishness had taught him, that real strength was never found in pushing away the people he loved to keep them safe. It was found in trusting Maya enough to let her stand beside him, danger and all. Years later, on a quiet evening walk beneath the glowing lights of Seoul, their young daughter tugged at Maya's hand and asked the question children eventually always ask. "Amma, how did you and Appa meet?" Maya smiled, glancing at Hyun-woo, who reached for her hand the way he had every single day since the divorce that nearly cost them everything. "Your father caught my bag before he ever caught my heart," Maya said softly. "But it was your grandmother who saved our family." Their daughter laughed, satisfied with the answer, and skipped ahead toward the glow of the city lights, unaware of the war her existence had quietly ended. Behind her, Maya and Hyun-woo walked together, hand in hand, proof that a love built on honesty, even honesty learned the hardest way possible, could survive anything the world tried to use against it. If this story moved you, let me know which part hit you the hardest. The sacrifice, the mother's discovery, or the reunion. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to Soul Tales, and drop a comment telling me what you'd like to see next. Another story is already on the way, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.